What we're doing today is taking a look at 3 resin chessboards that I made that the pour went badly. I see so many posts on Facebook saying my resin is flexible, it's bendy, it's not finished curing. It's been a week or 2 weeks and it's still not curing. What can I do to fix this? And so I thought we'd just take some time to share a couple of failed resin jobs and see if they can be restored, or under what circumstances you can recover from a failed pour. So I make these chessboards. I made 5 resin chessboards a couple of weeks ago using these molds basically. And these molds, I pour them in 3 layers. The first layer is a nice silver border around the outside. You can see it on this board with the white silver squares. And then the second layer, I fill the board about halfway up with a translucent resin, and then the final back of the board I pour a final layer, which is with a mica powder, so you can't see easily through the board. It covers all the squares and you don't have gaps in the squares. The first 2 layers all turned out fine on all 5 boards that I made, and these boards, they take about 4 hours to make when you do all 3 layers, and it costs in materials about $30 to make. So I was excited to make 5 of them and get ahead on inventory, but 3 of them didn't turn out the next day and 2 of them did. And of course you start to question, well, why did some of them turn out fine and some of them didn't? And so I took a look at the resin, and I want to share this with you. Now if you look, sorry about the wobble, you can see there is still resin in this part B hardener here. And if you look at the part A, you'll see similarly. Now I know that when I poured this, I used the right ratios. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a J-Diction brand. See, 1:1 by volume. Now I know that I poured the right volumes because you see that the amount that's left in both bottles is identical. So that means that this resin went bad. There was something wrong with it. Now I keep this resin indoors at about 68 degrees all the time. And I keep the lids on. And it was new resin, within a month old. So it's not like it was aged. But you'll notice that if I turn this over, that resin is not pouring. Either the A or the B. That's solid. And if you look in the A, you won't really be able to tell that it's set. But take a look in the B jar. Do you see that? That crystallization? Isn't that interesting? I was surprised to find that when I opened this jar. And you know what I think did it? 2 days before I poured these boards. Yeah, look at that. It's totally built up. Almost like from the top something leaked down and hardened it. Yeah, so anyway, what I think did this is 2 days before I poured these boards, I swapped the caps by accident. And I put the cap for A on the container B, and I put the cap for B on the container for A. It's a little plug that goes into the lid. And the next morning when I went to pour something, I had a heck of a time getting those plugs out of there. I pried it out, and then I continued pouring because there's still good resin left. Well, it's interesting. If you look at these boards, they got progressively better as I poured all 5. So the first board would have been this purple one. The second board was this pink one over here. And then the third was this orange. And then I did 2 others that were 2 other colors. And those 2 are fine. So the resin that was closest to the bottom of the container set better. And the resin that was closest to the air, to the top of the container, that I made the first boards with, turned out the worst and set the least. And so I think that when those lids got crossed over between them, it cross-contaminated the resin. And it's funny because it's not like these lids, the plugs, I don't have the plug here, but the plugs don't have a lot of resin on them. And I even cleaned them off before I put them back on the jar. but even just the fumes that carry some of the chemicals was enough to initiate the chemical reaction. So lessons learned, one is not to cross your caps over. And so I like the Litz resin brand actually puts a sticker on the top of the caps that say A or B. So you can make sure that you're putting it back on the right one. So that's something I appreciate with Litz resin. But if you get another brand like J. Dictions doesn't do that, so you may want to just, write on here, or I may start even just putting a little sticker on with A or B on there, or just keeping them separate when you're pouring so that you don't make the same mistake I did, because this inevitably is about $60 of materials and 6 or 8 hours of time. So anyway, the next question is any of it salvageable? And again, I see people post online and ask, can I fix it after it's this bad? And my answer to that is that the only time I've seen a cure be recoverable from a bad set is if it was restricted because of a temperature problem. Because temperature is a variable that you can change. You can control that. If you pour your resin and it's too cold, and then the next morning you correct it by turning the heat up, the resin will cure. It will set. It's, you have a little bit of leeway there. But if it's because the resin is bad, it's cross-contaminated like this was, there's really no way to come back from that. So the question then just becomes, do you throw the whole piece away, or do you try and peel the bad resin off if you're pouring on top, a layer? So take a look at this, for example. Here's from this pour. This is about 2 weeks old, so this should not be flexible. But I'm just putting a little bit of pressure here. And look at that flex. Isn't that something? It's actually kind of fun to play with. Like, I could almost see keeping this. It's even a little bit self-recoverable. Like, if you push into it, right, you can see that indent I just made. But if you come back in 5 minutes, that won't be there. It's kind of just set enough to be... It will be something you can hold. But take a look at this purple one here. I'm not fussing with this because it's so messy, as you know. Now, the top is fine because that's the first layer and second layer. But this was sitting on the countertop, and the first night it just looked like a regular chessboard. The second night, you can see the resin splodged out to the sides. Oh, it's so messy. So messy. What a waste. And it's funny because every day the resin got closer and closer to the edge of the countertop. It's even pulled out in some areas. You have some clear spots. So there's no hope for this. And if you set it outside in the cold in winter, it'll firm up so it won't be so sticky. But it's like, look at that. Look at that. It's like cooling lava. Still a little icky. You don't want to touch any of that. What a mess. The next one that was poured was this pink. And, again, front's fine. But watch the back. I'm trying to find a spot that you can see. Okay. I can push into that. You see that? That well I just created with my finger? I mean, that is totally malleable, right? You see that? So I'm curious if this is set just enough that we might be able to, like, roll it back, like peel it back, You think I can do that? Look at that. I can pull it back a little bit. And if we can do that, see, if this board had been sitting on an uneven surface for the past 2 weeks, then this good side, the first 2 layers, would be uneven. But if you look that down the barrel, so to speak. Okay, let's do it this way. That is straight. That first layer and second layer cured perfectly straight because it was sitting on a level surface. And so if we could, in theory, peel back this layer and pull this resin off of here, because the rest of the board is still good, I'm just wondering if we can pour over top of it. Maybe get it back into a mold or top coat it or something. I don't know if it's worth it, but because once we get this pulled back enough, you know, you still have some gup in there. But I have a sander. We could probably clean it up. It's just a shame. It's such a nice board, isn't that? It turned out pretty good. I mean, it's not polished or anything yet, but it'd be nice if we could salvage that. And then look at the next board. This one actually turned out almost perfectly set. I mean, I really can't even wiggle that hardly at all. It's set straight. Okay, look how nice that is. I mean, again, it's not polished or anything, but I like the darker parts. I put some alcohol ink on the back of that second layer so that you get some darker sections. Those all came out so good. But watch again here. Okay, I'm going to push just a little bit of pressure and you can see. But this one is set harder than the rest, and I don't think we'd be able to, I don't know, we might be able to pull. Probably could pull that back like the pink one. Sorry if it's not clear. But I was kind of contemplating, can we just pour over top of this then? Obviously we would need to get a hold of some of the good resin to bind against. So if we say we prop this up, okay, top coated it and let it flood the edges, so flood coat it, and let it bind with the good resin on this side down here, all the way around, and just totally embed that. I just don't know if it's worth it. But we're gonna, I guess, play around and find out, huh? I may post back and see, let you guys know how it turns out. Because this is actually my first orange board. And I really like the way it looks on the front. I'd be ashamed to waste the whole thing. It's so close to being set. So, anywho.